Now, in reference to water changes, how much and when to change the water is always a thing. Now, the first thing is you want to use a gravel cleaner, and then the gravel cleaner goes into the gravel, and if you're pulling a lot of crap out of the gravel, then you really should be changing your water more often, and you want to be every now and then moving your ornaments out of the way and getting underneath the ornaments and gravel cleaning with the gravel cleaner. This is the gravel cleaner. We stick that into the gravel. The gravel will fall down and all the dirt will come up out of the gravel. And how dirty this is will be an indication of how often you need to be doing water changes. Now, gravel cleaners like this are wonderful for spot cleans, but they're not really used for routine maintenance. So if you see a bit of waste on the bottom, having this is a wonderful way of just sucking a bit of waste out, but the other gravel cleaner is what you're really using for your routine maintenance. On a semi-regular basis, I'd recommend bringing a sample of water down to the shop. And we also want to be using the nitrate levels as an indicator of your water changes too. Because if your nitrate and phosphate start to build up, then increased water changes are going to help. And we really only want to be changing a quarter, maybe maximum of a third of the water. We definitely don't want to be changing too much water, otherwise we can shock the fish, particularly in winter. Now, every time we add new water, we want to add water ager. Now, just be aware that the concentrated water agers like Safe are very, very powerful. So you only need to use a relatively small amount. And if you overdose these water agers, it really isn't the end of the world, as this tank is testament to, but it does tend to raise your GH level artificially. So as well as the water ager, which in this case is Safe, we also want to be keeping an idea on the pH, KH. If your pH, KH falls, then you do want to be adding a buffer. And this buffer needs to be added when you add new water, but it needs to be added in coordination with the actual KH and pH level, because you don't want to keep adding this and find your KH and pH go up too much. Now, the other thing to be aware of too for the fish's immune system is GH salts. Now, this tank may have elevated levels of GH due to potentially overdoses of your water ager, because that will give you a synthetic raise in your GH. But these GH salts are actually very good for the cichlids, and so when you're doing a water change, adding some of this in is a good idea. But when you're doing a top up, you do not add this, because your GH will not naturally fall. You've actually got to take the water out in order for the GH to fall, whereas your KH will fall itself because those buffers will actually get used up. The quality of your fish is 50% water quality, which if you bring a sample of water down to us, we can check on that. And it's 50% food quality. So this food is probably the best quality food you can get. And this has the probiotic bacteria in it, which means when the fish poo, the bacteria in the poo eats the poo. So it's a very, very clean food. So therefore, using this food, it's hard to use the gravel as solely an indicator, because this food here you'll find is very, very clean. I'll tend to use this food with something like Dainichi's color, because I find that this food here is the cleanest food around. But I also find that if you add Dainichi color to your fish, I would think you'll actually get better color out of your fish. Oh, there you go, that one. So if you use this one as well, I find that your fish just look healthier and are more colorful. So that combination of those two foods is about as good as you can get. Now, I recommend that you feed your fish about 5 times a week, but ultimately what you're doing is looking at the fish, and you don't want the fish to be skinny. So right now, if we look at the fish, this peacock is pretty good. If you look underneath it, from the bottom of the gill plate to the anus, if there's a little bit of a belly like this guy's got, I'm very happy with that. This peacock here, I'm very happy with. This guy, electric yellow, he's a little bit on the tubby side, which is good. But some of them are just a little bit on the skinny side. I just want to see a little bit more size in the fish. And you do want to pay attention to which ones are skinny and which ones are fat, because some food floats, some food sinks, some food are bigger pellets and some are smaller pellets. So different food will advantage different fish. So all in all, these fish actually look quite good, but they're probably just a little bit on the skinny side. So I'd probably like to see a larger size pellet introduced. This pellet is a good size for most of the fish, and that other pellet that you had is a good size for most of the fish, but I'd probably add maybe a larger pellet as well, just to fill them up a little bit. And a bit of frozen food every now and then as a treat is something that I'd definitely be interested in. So oxygen is one of the most important things for an aquarium. And inside this air pump we're looking at here is going to be diaphragms. And diaphragms are sort of like car tires. Over time, the diaphragms do wear out. So every now and then, it's good to bring that pump down to the shop. We can open it up and see if the diaphragm needs replacing. Because at the moment, we've got a little bit of a bubble stream here, and then this one here has decided to stop working. So it's very possible that we could fix that pump and replace the diaphragm and get it working again. Because oxygen is also super important. So we've got another water pump here. Try to keep it on full. At the moment, that's not on full. And then we want to see good agitation of the surface. So one of the things we're really looking for is we want to see this surface agitate. We never want to see the surface flat, especially for a tank like this, which is very tall. So it has a very small surface area for a large volume of water. See, surface agitation is everything. If you're breaking the surface tension will be low, and then there'll be a high amount of oxygen in the water. If your surface is flat, the surface tension will be high, and then your dissolved oxygen level in the water will fall. So the fish are really coming to now. So we just see them get fed a little bit more. And also just remember that things like fake plants are temporary. After a year or two, they start looking crappy. So putting in some new ones would really vibe the tank up. And then also with your ornaments, it's really great just to chuck them in the sun for a day every now and then. And then the sun will sort of bleach off the algae, then turn it around, leave it in the sun for another day, hit it with a hose, and you'll be surprised how good your ornaments come up. So fish like your cichlids like a high mineral content. And so they want a high GH, so they want like high GH salts and things. But just be aware that water ages, particularly really powerful water ages like this, will synthetically raise your GH. But it will not give the benefit of the minerals and salts that your GH buffer will. So it's okay to use too much, but don't go silly with it. Otherwise you get an artificially raised GH level. And that does affect some of your bacteria and other stuff like that of minimal concern. But try not to overdose. A little overdose is okay, don't get silly. So there's just been a bit of a change around on this filter. I do really recommend putting a tray underneath any canisters just to catch a little bit of water, which does tend to dribble out over time, especially when you're changing it. And just be aware that there's been no good bacteria in there right now because that filter's been off for a little while. So this tank, you're going to want to feed very sparingly for the next couple of weeks, and it would be very good to add a good bacteria product. So there's various good bacteria products that put good bacteria back in the water. And then because there's a fair bit of extra space in that filter, I would really consider adding some established bacteria. So if you came down to the shop and said, I want some marine pure balls with bacteria in them, then you could grab like a litre or two of the bacteria balls and put them in there so they've already got good bacteria. Because the issue we're going to have in this tank now is that there's currently no good bacteria. So it's going to take at least a couple of weeks for that good bacteria to grow. And then I would not want to be adding new fish at all until I'm totally confident that the good bacteria is back again. And I'd keep the feeding fairly sparing. I'd move Mr. Holiday Block out. I only want Mr. Holiday Block in when you're actually on holidays. And so we want to slowly increase the food, not really in the next 2 weeks, but once the good bacteria is back in the filter. Now, if the bacteria is not in the filter, what we're going to see is nitrite and ammonia. So we really want to keep the nitrite and ammonia down. And then once the good bacteria is back in there and the nitrite and ammonia is down, then we can consider putting more fish in the tank. It's really important to be aware of the difference between a top-up and a water change. Now, the water will evaporate down at what you could consider to be almost an amazing rate sometimes, to the point where some people almost think there's a leak in their tank. The water evaporates down, then you put water in and top it up. A top-up is not a water change. Now, a top-up does not dilute accumulants. Now, when we say accumulants, what we're talking about is all sorts of things that we actually don't know a whole lot about and we actually can't test. I'm talking about pheromones, phenols, and all sorts of things that build up in your water. Now, in order for the water to reduce the accumulants, you can either use medias like polyfilter and carbon to remove accumulants. Otherwise, if you do a water change, so you got to take water out, and that will remove things that accumulate in the water. Then you fill the water back up again, and you're putting clean water in, so that will defuse down your accumulants.